The day my husband looked me in the eyes and said, "That baby isn't mine." 3 days later, a phone call changed everything. Good day, everyone. I'm so grateful you're here with me today. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoy stories about betrayal, revenge, and unexpected justice. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. People think the end of a marriage arrives with one terrible argument. They're wrong. Most marriages don't collapse all at once. They erode quietly, one unexplained moment at a time. A late-night phone call, a smile that disappears a little too quickly, a conversation that suddenly stops when you enter the room. When you love someone, you become an expert at explaining away the things that should frighten you. I know because I did exactly that. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and until 6 months ago, I believed I had the kind of marriage people envied. My husband, Nathan, and I had been together for almost 7 years. We owned a beautiful craftsman-style home just outside Charlotte, North Carolina, in one of those neighborhoods where every mailbox matched and everyone pretended they weren't quietly competing with each other. I worked as a commercial interior designer. Nathan owned a property investment company with 2 business partners. Financially, we were comfortable. Socially, we were admired. Emotionally, well, that's the part nobody could see. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact season when everything started changing. It wasn't dramatic. Nathan simply became unavailable. He wasn't working longer hours. He was disappearing during the hours he was already supposed to be working. Sometimes I'd call him at 3 in the afternoon, straight to voicemail. An hour later, he'd text, "Sorry, in a meeting." Then I'd glance at our neighborhood security app and notice his SUV had been parked in our driveway the entire time. When I asked him about it, he laughed. "Conference calls, Lauren. Not every meeting happens in an office." Reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. So I believed him. Then came the passwords. Nathan had never hidden his phone from me. One weekend, I reached for it to order dinner because mine was charging. He stopped me before I even unlocked it. I've got confidential client files on there. The words themselves weren't strange. The speed with which he said them was. Almost rehearsed. I apologized. He smiled. We ordered pizza. Life continued. Or at least that's what I thought. A month later, I noticed something else. Every Thursday evening, Nathan drove across town. He always claimed he was meeting investors. One Thursday, purely by coincidence, I had dinner with a client at the very restaurant where those investor meetings supposedly happened. Nathan wasn't there. Neither were any investors. When I casually mentioned it later that night, he didn't even blink. They changed the location at the last minute. Again. Reasonable. Again. I let it go. Love has a strange way of making obvious lies sound perfectly logical. Then the questions started. Not about me. About someone I hadn't thought about in years. My former fiancé. His name was Ethan Brooks. We dated in our 20s. We were engaged briefly before realizing we wanted completely different futures. There wasn't any cheating, no screaming matches, no dramatic ending. We simply walked away. He eventually moved to Seattle. I stayed in North Carolina. We hadn't spoken in over 11 years. Nathan knew all of that, which made his sudden curiosity feel odd. "So whatever happened to Ethan?" he'd ask while watching television. "I don't know. You never looked him up?" "No. I heard he got into finance. Maybe." That was it. A tiny conversation. Harmless. Or so I believed. Over the next several weeks, he brought Ethan up again. And again. Always casually. Always pretending the question had just crossed his mind. If I hadn't been paying attention, I probably wouldn't have noticed. But by the 4th time, I did. Still, I convinced myself it was insecurity. Maybe turning 40 had made Nathan reflective. Maybe he was comparing himself to my past. There are countless explanations people invent when they don't want to face the truth. Mine were especially creative. Then something wonderful happened. At least, I thought it was wonderful. After years of quietly hoping, I found out I was pregnant. I stared at the test for almost 5 minutes before I believed it. Then I cried. Not because I was scared, because I was happy. Nathan and I had talked about children dozens of times. The timing had never seemed right. Work, travel, life. There was always another reason to wait. Now, it was finally happening. I scheduled an appointment with my doctor. 8 weeks. Healthy. Everything looked perfect. Driving home, I stopped at a children's boutique. I bought a tiny pair of white baby shoes. Then I picked up a small gift box. Inside, I placed the ultrasound photo, the shoes, and a handwritten note. Our greatest project begins now. Interior designers think in projects. Nathan always teased me about that. I imagined him laughing when he read it. I imagined him picking me up and spinning me around the kitchen. I imagined calling our parents. I imagined everything. Reality had other plans. Nathan came home just after 6. He looked tired, distracted. I kissed him anyway. "I have something for you." He smiled politely. "A gift? What's the occasion?" "Just open it." He untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, pulled out the ultrasound, then the shoes. His smile disappeared, not slowly, instantly. He looked at the photograph, then at me. His face became so cold that for one terrifying second I wondered if someone in his family had died. Nathan? He placed everything back inside the box with unbelievable care, closed the lid, set it on the kitchen island. Then he looked directly into my eyes. "I know exactly what this is." I laughed nervously. "Well, I hope so." He didn't laugh back. Instead, he folded his arms. "That baby isn't mine." I stared at him, certain I'd misunderstood. "What?" "You heard me. Nathan. I've suspected something for months. My heart began pounding so hard it hurt." "What are you talking about?" "You've been lying to me. I have never." "Stop." His voice was calm. Too calm. "I won't raise another man's child." I couldn't breathe. "I've never cheated on you." "I don't believe you." "You have to." "I don't." Every sentence landed like another brick on my chest. I reached for his hand. He stepped backward. "Don't touch me." Those 3 words hurt even more than the accusation. I spent nearly an hour trying to make him listen, trying to understand, trying to figure out what had happened between the husband who kissed me goodbye every morning and the stranger standing across the kitchen. Nothing worked. Around 9 o'clock, he walked upstairs, came back carrying one suitcase, dropped it beside the front door. "You need to leave." I honestly thought he was bluffing until he opened the front door himself. "I'll have my attorney contact you." "Nathan, if you refuse to leave, I'll call the police." I looked at him, really looked at him. There wasn't anger on his face. There wasn't sadness. There wasn't heartbreak. There was only certainty. As though this entire conversation had already happened somewhere inside his head long before I ever walked through the front door with that little gift box. 25 minutes later, I was sitting alone in my car. The suitcase rested in the back seat. The tiny white baby shoes were still inside the unopened gift box beside me. I parked beneath a streetlight outside a 24-hour pharmacy because it was the only place I could think of that felt even remotely safe. People walked in and out buying medicine, snacks, and bottled water. Normal lives. Normal evenings. Meanwhile, mine had ended in less than 3 hours. I checked my bank account. $487. That was all I could immediately access. Our savings? Joint account. Our emergency fund? Joint account. Most of my important documents? Still inside the house Nathan had just thrown me out of. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. One question kept echoing inside my mind. Why? Not? Why doesn't he believe me? But why was he so certain before I even said a word? Because innocent people ask questions. Nathan hadn't asked a single one. He never demanded a DNA test. He never asked for an explanation. He had already reached his verdict before opening that gift box. That realization settled into my chest like ice, and for the first time that night, I stopped crying. Something wasn't right. Something much bigger than a false accusation was happening. I just didn't know what it was yet. Then, as I absent-mindedly scrolled through old emails while sitting in that silent parking lot, my eyes landed on a familiar name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Ethan Brooks. Nathan had been asking about him for months. At the time, I thought it was jealousy. Now, for reasons I couldn't explain, it suddenly felt like something else entirely. And I had the overwhelming feeling that if I could figure out why my husband had become obsessed with a man I'd left 11 years ago, I'd finally understand why he'd destroyed our marriage in a single evening. I just had no idea that the truth waiting for me was worth far more than either of us could have imagined. I didn't sleep that night. Around sunrise, I drove to a small diner, ordered coffee I couldn't drink, and began thinking logically for the first time since Nathan threw me out. If he truly believed I'd cheated, Why had he emptied nearly all the money from our joint account less than an hour after forcing me out? That wasn't heartbreak. That was preparation. By 9 o'clock, I was sitting in the office of Melissa Grant, a family attorney a client had once recommended. She listened quietly while I explained everything. When I finished, she looked at me and asked one question. Has your husband been asking about anyone from your past? I nodded. My former fiancé. And when did that start? A few months ago. Melissa leaned back. I don't think that's a coincidence. Before I left, she instructed me to gather every financial record I could access and told me not to sign or agree to anything Nathan sent me. Just as I walked out of her office, my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I would have ignored it. Instead, I answered. Miss Mitchell? Yes. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm an estate attorney calling from Seattle. My stomach tightened. I'm sorry. Who? I represent the estate of Ethan Brooks. For a moment, I couldn't speak. What about Ethan? I'm very sorry to tell you this, but Mr. Brooks passed away several months ago. The world seemed to stop. He left specific instructions for us to locate you. I gripped the phone tighter. There is a substantial inheritance in which you are named as a beneficiary. I leaned against my car because my knees suddenly felt weak. There must be some mistake. There isn't. My voice barely came out. How much? There was a brief pause. Approximately $84 million. I closed my eyes. Then Daniel said the sentence that explained everything. But before we can release any funds, you'll need to come to Seattle in person. There is one condition Mr. Brooks personally included in his trust. At that exact moment, everything Nathan had done over the past few months suddenly began to make sense. He hadn't thrown me out because he believed I was unfaithful. He threw me out because he knew something I didn't. I flew to Seattle 3 days later. Before leaving, Melissa filed an emergency motion preventing Nathan from moving any more marital assets. She also arranged for a sheriff's deputy to accompany me back to the house so I could collect my belongings. Nathan was waiting when I arrived. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I was. He just watched me pack with an expression that looked more nervous than angry. Sir, that surprised me. His mother, Carol, sat silently at the dining table, following every box I carried to the front door. As I picked up the last one, she finally spoke. You're making a terrible mistake, Lauren. I looked at her. I don't think I am. She smiled. The truth has a way of disappointing people. I walked out without answering. The next morning, I had Daniel Mercer's office in downtown Seattle. The paperwork took nearly 4 hours. Identity verification, trust documents, beneficiary confirmation. When everything was finished, Daniel slid one final folder across the desk. Ethan updated his trust 8 months before he passed away. I looked up. He told us one thing. What was that? Daniel smiled sadly. He said, if anything ever happens to me, make sure Lauren has a future no one can ever take away from her. I couldn't stop the tears. I hadn't spoken to Ethan in over a decade. Yet somehow he had never forgotten my kindness. Before I left, Daniel gave me one piece of advice. Keep every dollar separate from your marriage. I plan to. Good, he replied, because someone has already been trying very hard to find out what you inherited. I froze. What do you mean? He opened a file. About 6 weeks ago, someone called this office pretending to be a financial journalist asking questions about Mr. Brooks' estate and about you. My heart skipped. Do you know who? No. But the call came from North Carolina. Suddenly, Carol's strange confidence, Nathan's accusations, his rush to throw me out, it all fit together. This had never been about my pregnancy. They had known about Ethan's estate before I did, and they tried to get rid of me before I could claim it. I walked out of the law office with one terrifying realization. I wasn't divorcing a jealous husband. I was fighting 2 people who had been planning this for months. I barely made it back to Charlotte before the pressure started. First came the phone call. A man introduced himself as a friend of Nathan. I think you're making this divorce harder than it needs to be, he said. I don't know who you are. You don't need to. Just take the settlement, stop asking questions, and everyone's life gets easier. I hung up immediately. Melissa filed a harassment complaint that same afternoon. 2 days later, Nathan's attorney requested mediation. The timing wasn't a coincidence. Neither was the offer. Nathan agreed to a quick divorce. He would return part of the money from our joint account. He wouldn't challenge any inheritance I received. There was only one condition. I had to sign a confidentiality agreement. I laughed when I finished reading it. Melissa smiled. He doesn't care about the divorce. He cares about keeping me quiet. Exactly. We rejected the offer without making a counterproposal. That same evening, I received another unexpected phone call. It was Ethan's older sister, Claire. I remembered something, she said. What is it? A woman called me a few months ago. My heart skipped. She claimed she was writing an article about successful entrepreneurs. And she kept asking whether Ethan had left money to anyone outside the family. I already knew the answer before Claire said the next sentence. The caller had a North Carolina number. I slowly lowered the phone. There was only one person obsessed enough, patient enough, and manipulative enough. Nathan's mother. Nathan's mother. She hadn't just encouraged her son. She had helped plan everything. The accusation, the eviction, the pressure, even the attempt to learn about Ethan's estate. For the first time since all this began, I realized I wasn't just exposing a dishonest husband. I was uncovering a family conspiracy built on greed, and I had a feeling they were about to make one final mistake. The court ordered both sides to exchange financial records. Nathan fought every request. The judge approved them anyway. What Melissa uncovered changed everything. Nathan had searched Ethan Brooks' name nearly a year before throwing me out. Dozens of searches, business articles, estate planning websites, even probate records. He hadn't been suspicious. He had been researching. Then came the emails. One message from Nathan to his attorney stood out. We have to get this resolved before Lauren is contacted. It was sent 4 days before he accused me of carrying another man's child. Melissa placed the printed email on the conference table during Nathan's deposition. His face lost all color. Did you write this? She asked. Yes. Were you aware your wife was named in Ethan Brooks' estate before she was? His attorney immediately objected. Nathan stayed silent. The silence lasted nearly 5 seconds. That was all the answer anyone needed. A week later, Nathan asked to settle. He surrendered every claim to my inheritance, returned every dollar he had taken from our joint account, transferred the house to me, and accepted a divorce on my terms. There was no confidentiality agreement, no apology, just signatures. One final document arrived before everything became official: the prenatal DNA test. Exactly as I had always known, Nathan was the father of my baby. His accusation had been a lie from the very beginning. Months later, my daughter Grace was born healthy. I opened my own design studio, bought a home filled with sunlight, and finally found the peace I'd spent years searching for. As for Nathan, he lost far more than a marriage. He lost the one person who had loved him before money became more important than loyalty. Sometimes people think revenge is about making someone suffer. It isn't. Real revenge is living a life they can never be part of again. And every time I watch my daughter laugh in the backyard of the home we built together, I remember one simple truth. Greed can destroy a family, but integrity can rebuild a life.